you need to move the amendments, which you have now. The question is that the amendments be agreed to, and I call the member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd just like to say I take the minister up on his challenge, and if I'm elected to the next parliament, I'll be voting to reverse these measures because I think they're totally unfair and unreasonable. Really, government should be about priorities for people, and we've seen the government's priority has been very narrow. First, they wanted to introduce a co-payment, which would have attacked the elderly, and then they wanted to increase the pension age to 70 years, and they're unable to do that. And now they've come back today and decided that they're going to take from pensioners of Australia parts of their pension to make their life not better, but harder and more difficult. They do this in a situation where Australia has adequate financial capacity to look after those less fortunate than ourselves, and we have debt levels among the lowest of the OECD countries. Interestingly enough, in Australia we spend about 8% of our GDP on the elderly, and in Europe they spend about 20% of their GDP on the elderly and disadvantaged. That gives you an indication of the priority this government puts on our elderly and disadvantaged people. Are Australians any less worthy than those that live in Europe? Do they have any less needs? Are they better looked after? Well, you'd have to say no when you look at the amount of money being spent in the health system as a proportion of GDP with what's spent in Europe and the United States and other developed economies. So again, the government seems to be attacking those that can least afford it. You know, a person who has $25,000 in earnings in superannuation will lose over $8,000 of their pension. Really, it hardly acts as an encouragement for people to put money away for super, to provide for the future. They're going to see half of it go, because also they'll lose their eligibility for part of the pension. That's a negative incentive. We really need to provide the incentive the other way. We need to boost demand in this country and to ensure that the money supply is sufficient to create growth so the government will have the revenue to provide for those that need support. I don't think I've ever seen in my life a person who's receiving the pension enjoying a high standard of living, wasting money, going out, doing things that other people and other Australians aren't entitled to do. Life shouldn't end when you reach pension age. We shouldn't disregard people and Australians who have served this country well over many years and fought in different world wars, the Second World War, Korea, Vietnam and other conflicts for the nation, only to find in the twilight years of their life they're being disregarded, that their priorities being put very low on the government's agenda. Surely the government should be a government for all Australians, one that has a responsibility to look after their standard of living, their future and what they can aspire to be. You know, we don't just love our mothers and our children, we love our grandparents as well. And our love shouldn't be diminished by the way we treat them in society. What sort of example does that set for future generations coming forward? It's not just about the present, it should be about the past and recognising the senior citizens of Australia as people that we should respect, that wisdom resides in a lot of our elder citizens, that they still have a lot to contribute to Australia. How can they have the respect from the community if they're constantly being attacked, if their income and their life is being slowly diminished by a government that continues to cut away at the small entitlements that they have at the moment? At a time when we have a government that has less debt than the Menzies government had. The Menzies government had a debt of about 40% of GDP. Today we're around about 14% of GDP. Where's that other 30% gone? Why doesn't the Liberal Party become the party of Bob Menzies, that looked after all Australians? It was a broad church that provided a rising standard of living, that had expectations that whoever you are, wherever you came from, regardless of how much money you had, you could have a fair go in this country and be looked after. Why do we have to have a persecution philosophy where we aim at those people who are unable to support themselves or defend themselves when under attack? Why do we constantly attack them? Why don't we create the sort of incentives that are needed in this country to provide a rising standard of living for our people? Bob Menzies would be rolling in his grave if he saw the sorts of procedures that are coming forward in this parliament to attack those that can't look after themselves, to attack the pensioners of Australia. The pension for many people has been sacrosanct, most important in their sustainability and their lifestyle. I think we have to all vote against these measures. We have to support our elderly, we have to support those on a pension and fixed income, and we realise that the figures that the Minister has quoted today are not extraordinarily high when viewed with other competing nations that have other standards of living such as our own in Europe and the United States, and I'll be voting against the measure.
I thank the member for Fairfax. The question is that the amendments be agreed to.